The house smelled of dust and time, the kind of scent that clings to old curtains and worn floorboards, whispering memories no one wants to hear. Evelyn Harper sat in her armchair, its fabric frayed from years of use, her fingers tracing the edges of a photograph. Her son, Daniel, smiled back at her from the faded image, his eyes bright with the promise of a life cut short. He'd been gone 6 months now, taken by a cruel accident, a car spinning out on an icy road. The pain was a constant weight, like a stone lodged in her chest. But Evelyn had learned to carry it. She had no choice. The house, a modest 2-story cottage on the edge of Willow Creek, was all she had left of him. Daniel had grown up here, his laughter once echoing through its narrow halls. Every creak in the floorboards was a reminder of his footsteps, every scuff on the walls a mark of his life. Evelyn had lived here for 50 years, first with her husband, George, until cancer claimed him, and then with Daniel, her only child. Now, at 78, she was alone, save for the ghosts that lingered in the corners. But the house wasn't just a home, it was a battleground. Across town, in a sleek office with glass walls and polished desks, her daughter-in-law, Marianne, was plotting to take it from her. Marianne, with her sharp suits and sharper tongue, had never loved Daniel the way Evelyn believed he deserved. Their marriage had been a storm of arguments and silences. But Daniel had stayed, hoping to salvage something for their daughter, Lily. Now, with Daniel gone, Marianne wanted the house, claiming it was rightfully hers as his widow. Evelyn's name on the deed meant nothing to her. She wanted Evelyn out. The first letter arrived a month after Daniel's funeral. It was cold, formal, typed on crisp letterhead from a lawyer Evelyn didn't know. Notice of intent to reclaim property. It read, as if the house were a forgotten trinket Marianne had stumbled upon. Evelyn's hands trembled as she read it, her coffee growing cold on the kitchen table. Marianne claimed the house was part of Daniel's estate, and since she was his legal heir, it belonged to her. Evelyn, the letter implied, was merely a tenant, one who had overstayed her welcome. Evelyn had stared at the words until they blurred, her heart pounding with a mix of grief and fury. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was her life, her memories, her last tether to Daniel. She'd raised him here, nursed him through fevers, cheered at his soccer games in the backyard. Marianne had no right to it, no claim that could outweigh Evelyn's decades of love poured into these walls. But Marianne was relentless, a woman who thrived on control, and she wasn't stopping at a letter. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, pulling Evelyn from her thoughts. She set the photograph on the side table and shuffled to the door, her joints protesting with every step. Through the peephole, she saw Marianne, her lips pressed into a thin line, her blonde hair pulled back tightly. Evelyn's stomach twisted, but she opened the door. "Evelyn," Marianne said, her voice clipped, like she was addressing a disobedient employee. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This is my home." Marianne's eyes narrowed. It was Daniel's home, too. And mine, by extension. You can't stay here forever, Evelyn. It's time to move on. Move on. The words cut deeper than Marianne could know. Move on from what? From the only place where Daniel's presence still lingered. From the life she'd built. Evelyn straightened, her frail frame suddenly rigid with defiance. "I'm not going anywhere." Marianne sighed, as if Evelyn were a child throwing a tantrum. "You'll regret this," she said, turning on her heel and striding back to her car. The engine roared to life, and she was gone, leaving Evelyn standing in the doorway, the autumn chill seeping into her bones. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out before her, its words mocking her. She thought of Daniel, of his crooked smile, of the way he'd always hug her before leaving for work. She thought of Lily, her granddaughter, who was only 10 and caught in the middle of this war. Marian had kept Lily away since the funeral, claiming Evelyn was too fragile to care for her. The absence of Lily's laughter was another wound, one that bled quietly. But Evelyn wasn't fragile. Not yet. She'd survived too much George's death, Daniel's loss, years of scraping by on a widow's pension. She wasn't about to let Marianne take the last piece of her world. The deed to the house was in her name, a fact Marianne seemed to think she could overturn with enough legal pressure. Evelyn didn't know much about the law, but she knew this. She'd fight for her home until her last breath. The next morning, Evelyn drove to the local library, her old Buick rattling with every turn. She spent hours poring over property law books, her glasses slipping down her nose as she scribbled notes. The librarian, a kind woman named Clara, helped her navigate the computer, pulling up records of the house's ownership. Evelyn learned that the deed was indeed hers, a gift from George before he passed. But Marianne's claim hinged on a technicality. Daniel's name had been added to the title years ago, a decision Evelyn had agreed to in a moment of trust. Now, Marianne was exploiting that trust, arguing that Daniel's share passed to her. Evelyn's heart sank, but she didn't give up. She found a legal aid office in town and made an appointment. The lawyer, a young man named Tom with an earnest face, listened to her story, his brow furrowing as she explained Marianne's tactics. "This is complicated," he said, "but you have a strong case. The house is primarily yours. We just need to prove it." Prove it. The words echoed in Evelyn's mind as she drove home. How do you prove a lifetime of love, of sacrifice, of memories? How do you prove that a house is more than a piece of paper? She didn't know, but she'd find a way. For Daniel, for Lily, for herself. The days blurred into weeks, each one marked by another letter, another phone call, another threat from Marianne. Evelyn's mailbox became a battleground, stuffed with legal notices and demands for her to vacate. Marianne's lawyer was relentless, citing obscure statutes and twisting the truth to paint Evelyn as a squatter in her own home. But Evelyn wasn't backing down. She met with Tom twice a week, bringing him every document she could find: tax records, utility bills, even old love letters from George that mentioned the house as their shared dream. Each piece was a brick in the wall she was building to protect her home. The fight was exhausting, though. Evelyn's savings dwindled as she paid for copies, filing fees, and gas to drive to the legal aid office. Her pension barely covered her groceries, let alone the cost of a protracted legal battle. At night, she lay awake, the silence of the house pressing in, broken only by the creak of the pipes or the groan of the wind against the windows. She wondered what Daniel would think of this, of his mother and his wife tearing each other apart over the place he'd loved. One afternoon, as Evelyn sorted through a box of Daniel's old things, she found a journal. It was small, leather-bound, the kind he used to carry everywhere when he was younger. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The pages yellowed but filled with his neat handwriting. Most entries were mundane notes about work, sketches of birds he'd seen on his walks, but one caught her eye, dated a year before his death. "Talk to Mom about the house today," it read. "She's worried about money. Told her I'd put my name on the deed to help with taxes. But it's hers. Always will be. Marian doesn't get it. But this place is Mom's heart." Evelyn's breath caught. She read the words again, tears blurring her vision. Daniel had known. Even then, that the house was her anchor. He'd added his name to protect her, not to give Marianne a claim. The journal was a lifeline, a piece of evidence that could sway a judge. She called Tom immediately, her voice shaking with hope for the first time in weeks. He agreed it was significant and urged her to bring it to their next meeting. But hope was a fragile thing, and Marianne was quick to crush it. The next day, she showed up unannounced, this time with Lily in tow. Evelyn's heart leaped at the sight of her granddaughter, her dark curls bouncing as she ran to hug her. "Grandma," Lily cried, her small arms wrapping around Evelyn's waist. For a moment, the world felt right again. But Marianne's presence loomed like a storm cloud. "I brought Lily to see the house one last time," Marianne said, her tone icy. "She needs to understand it won't be hers forever." Evelyn's blood boiled, but she kept her voice calm for Lily's sake. "This is my home, Marianne, and Lily's, as long as she wants it to be." Marianne scoffed, glancing around the cluttered living room as if it were a junkyard. "This place is falling apart. You're doing Lily a disservice by clinging to it." Lily looked between them, her eyes wide with confusion. Evelyn knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees, and took Lily's hands. "This house is where your daddy grew up," she said softly. "It's full of love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Marianne's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. She grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her toward the door. "We're leaving," she said. "You have until the end of the month, Evelyn." As the door slammed shut, Evelyn sank into her chair, her hands shaking. The end of the month was 2 weeks away. She clutched Daniel's journal, its weight grounding her. She wouldn't let Marianne win out like this. She called Tom and arranged to meet him the next day, determined to use the journal to strengthen her case. The legal aid office was a small, cluttered space, but Tom's enthusiasm gave it life. He read the journal entry, his eyes lighting up. "This is huge," he said. "It shows intent. Daniel didn't want the house to pass to Marianne. We can argue that your ownership is paramount." Evelyn nodded, but her mind was on Lily. Marianne was using her granddaughter as a pawn, parading her in front of Evelyn to twist the knife. It wasn't just about the house Anna Maria, it was about family, about protecting what Daniel had wanted for his daughter. Evelyn spent the next few days gathering more evidence, old photos, receipts for repairs she'd paid for, anything to prove the house was hers in spirit and law. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, a knock at the door startled her. It was Clara, the librarian, holding a folder. "I did some digging," Clara said, her smile warm. "Found some old town records about your property. Thought they might help." Evelyn invited her in, grateful for the unexpected ally. The records showed the house had been in her family for 3 generations, passed down through her mother before George bought it outright. It was another piece of the puzzle, proof of her deep roots. As Clara left, Evelyn felt a spark of strength. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her family's legacy. The courtroom was colder than Evelyn expected, its wooden benches hard against her aching back. She sat beside Tom, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the journal tucked safely in her purse. Across the aisle, Marianne sat with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who radiated confidence. Evelyn felt small in comparison, her worn cardigan and sensible shoes no match for their polished demeanor. But she wasn't here to impress, she was here to fight. The judge, a woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression, called the case to order. Tom presented Evelyn's side first, laying out the history of the house, her lifelong residency, and Daniel's journal entry. He argued that Evelyn's ownership was clear, that Daniel's addition to the deed was meant to support her. not to transfer rights to Marianne. The journal was entered as evidence. Its words read aloud in the quiet courtroom. Evelyn's throat tightened as she heard Daniel's voice through the pages, his love for her echoing in the sterile space. Marianne's lawyer countered with a barrage of legal jargon, claiming Daniel's share of the house passed to his widow under estate law. He painted Evelyn as an elderly woman clinging to a property she could no longer maintain, suggesting she'd be better off in a retirement home. The words stung, but Evelyn kept her gaze steady, refusing to let them see her falter. The hearing stretched on, each side presenting documents and arguments. Evelyn testified, her voice trembling but clear as she spoke of the house's meaning, of Daniel's childhood, of the life she'd built. "It's not just a house," she said, her eyes locked on the judge. "It's my son's memory. It's where my granddaughter belongs." The judge listened, her face unreadable, and adjourned the case for a week to review the evidence. Evelyn left the courthouse feeling drained but resolute. She'd done all she could. Now, it was in the judge's hands. Back home, the house felt quieter than ever. Evelyn wandered through its rooms, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs. She stopped at Daniel's old bedroom, now a storage space for his things. She opened a box and found a stack of letters he'd written to Lily when she was younger, promising to take her fishing, to teach her to ride a bike. Tears fell as Evelyn read them, her heart aching for the future Daniel would never have. The next day, she visited Clara at the library, needing a friend to lean on. Clara brewed tea in the staff room, listening as Evelyn poured out her fears. "What if I lose?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if she takes everything?" Clara reached across the table, her hand warm on Evelyn's. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "And you're not alone. This town knows you. Evelyn, we know what that house means to you." Clara's words stayed with Evelyn, a small comfort in the storm. She spent the week preparing, gathering more documents, calling old neighbors who could vouch for her history with the house. One of them, Mr. Jenkins, a retired carpenter who'd helped George fix the porch years ago, offered to testify if needed. "That house is yours," he said gruffly. "Always has been." The night before the next hearing, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, the journal open in her lap, and thought of Lily. She hadn't seen her granddaughter since Marianne's visit, and the absence gnawed at her. She wrote a letter to Lily, pouring out her love, her memories of Daniel, her hopes for their future. "This house will always be your home," she wrote, "no matter what happens." She sealed the letter, tucking it into the journal, and prayed she'd have the chance to give it to her. The second hearing was more intense. Marianne's lawyer brought new documents, claiming Daniel had intended to sell the house before his death. It was a lie, Evelyn knew, but it shook her. Tom countered fiercely, presenting the town records Clara had found and a sworn statement from Mr. Jenkins. The judge asked pointed questions, her gaze sharp as she studied both sides. Evelyn felt the weight of every word, every glance, knowing her life hung in the balance. As the hearing ended, the judge announced she'd deliver a ruling in 3 days. Evelyn drove home, her hands gripping the wheel, her mind racing. 3 days. 3 days to wonder if she'd lose everything. She thought of Daniel, of his journal, of the promise he'd made to keep the house hers. She thought of Lily, caught in a battle she didn't understand. And she thought of herself, a woman who'd lost so much but refused to break. That night, Evelyn dreamed of Daniel. He was young again, running through the backyard, laughing as he chased fireflies. She woke with tears on her cheeks, but also with a fire in her chest. She wouldn't let Marianne win. Not now. Not ever. The 3 days before the ruling felt like an eternity. Evelyn filled the hours with small tasks, cleaning the house, tending the overgrown garden, sorting through Daniel's things. Each chore was a way to keep her hands busy, to quiet the fear that gnawed at her. She found an old soccer ball in the garage, scuffed and deflated, and remembered Daniel kicking it across the lawn, his laughter bright under the summer sun. She held it close, as if it could anchor her to him. Clara stopped by with a casserole and news from town. "People are talking," she said, setting the dish on the kitchen counter. "They're on your side, Evelyn. They know what Marianne's doing isn't right." The words warmed Evelyn, but they couldn't erase the dread. Marianne had money, a sharp lawyer, and a knack for bending the truth. Evelyn had only her memories and a few pieces of paper. The morning of the ruling, Evelyn dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress George had loved. She looked in the mirror, seeing the lines etched deep in her face, the silver in her hair. She was old, yes, but not broken. She drove to the courthouse, her heart pounding, Tom waiting for her outside. "Whatever happens," he said, squeezing her hand, "you fought hard." The courtroom was packed. A few neighbors from Willow Creek sitting in the back, their presence a quiet support. Marianne sat across the aisle, her face a mask of calm, but Evelyn saw the tension in her jaw. The judge entered, her expression as unreadable as ever, and Evelyn held her breath. The ruling was clear and swift. The judge acknowledged Daniel's name on the deed, but emphasized his journal, the town records, and Evelyn's lifelong connection to the house. The intent of the deceased was to support his mother's ownership. She said, "The property remains with Evelyn Harper." Marianne's claim was dismissed. The house was Evelyn's. Unequivocally. Relief flooded Evelyn, so strong she nearly collapsed. Tom steadied her, his smile wide. Across the aisle, Marianne's face twisted with fury, but she said nothing, gathering her things and storming out. Evelyn's neighbors clapped softly, their support a quiet hum in the room. She thanked Tom, her voice choked with emotion, and drove home, the weight of the past months lifting with every mile. But the victory was bittersweet. The house was hers, but the rift with Marianne was wider than ever, and Lily was still out of reach. Evelyn spent the evening writing another letter to her granddaughter, promising to keep the house ready for her, to fill it with love until she could visit again. She tucked it into the journal, her heart aching but hopeful. The next morning, Evelyn woke to a surprise. A letter from Marianne's lawyer arrived. Not a threat this time, but a proposal. Marianne wanted to meet, to discuss terms. Evelyn's first instinct was to refuse, but Tom advised her to hear Marianne out. "She's lost," he said. "She might be ready to negotiate." The meeting took place at a cafe in town, a neutral ground. Marianne looked tired, her usual polish dulled by defeat. She didn't apologize, but her tone was softer. "I want what's best for Lily," she said. "You can keep the house, Evelyn, but I need to know Lily has a future." Evelyn studied her, searching for sincerity. "Lily's future is with family," she said. "This house is part of that. You're welcome here, Marianne, but only if you respect what it means to me." Marianne hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring Lily to visit. Next weekend." It wasn't a truce. Not quite. But it was a start. Evelyn felt a flicker of hope, the first in months. That weekend, Lily arrived, her eyes bright with excitement. She ran through the house, touching everything, asking about her father. Evelyn showed her the soccer ball, the journal, the photos. weaving stories of Daniel's life. For the first time since his death, the house felt alive again, filled with laughter instead of ghosts. But Evelyn knew the fight wasn't over. Marianne's concession was fragile, and the wounds between them ran deep. She spent the next days organizing the house, making space for Lily's visits, and meeting with Tom to ensure the deed was ironclad. She also reached out to a local community center, offering to host a support group for grieving parents. The house, she decided, would be more than her refuge, would be a place of healing for others, too. As she sat in her armchair that evening, Daniel's photograph in her hands, Evelyn felt a quiet strength. She'd fought for her home and won. But the real victory was keeping Daniel's memory alive, for herself and for Lily. The house was hers, not just in law, but in spirit. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding. Lily's visits became a bright spot in Evelyn's life, each one filled with stories, games, and moments that stitched her heart back together. She taught Lily to bake Daniel's favorite oatmeal cookies, the kitchen filling with the warm scent of cinnamon. Lily's laughter echoed through the house, a sound Evelyn hadn't realized she'd been starving for. But Marianne's presence lingered like a shadow. She dropped Lily off and picked her up. Her interactions with Evelyn curt but civil. It was progress, but trust was a long way off. Evelyn threw herself into the community center project, transforming the house into a haven for others who'd lost children. She cleared the dining room, setting up chairs and a small table for coffee and tissues. The first meeting was small, just 3 other parents, their faces heavy with grief, but it was a start. They shared stories, tears, and silences, and Evelyn felt Daniel's presence in the room, as if he were guiding her to help others carry their pain. One evening, as she prepared for the next meeting, a knock at the door startled her. It was Mr. Jenkins, the old carpenter, holding a toolbox. "Thought the porch could use some work," he said gruffly. "No charge." "For Daniel." Evelyn's eyes welled up as she watched him sand and paint, the porch slowly coming back to life. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone. That Willow Creek was her family, too. But not all surprises were kind. A week later, Evelyn received a call from Tom. Marianne had filed an appeal, claiming new evidence about Daniel's intentions. It was a desperate move, Tom said, likely to fail, but it meant more court dates, more expenses. Evelyn's heart sank. She'd thought the battle was over, but Marianne wasn't giving up. "We'll fight it," Tom assured her. "The judge knows your story now." Evelyn spent the next days preparing, digging through more of Daniel's things for anything that might help. She found a letter he'd written to Marianne, dated months before his death. It was raw, honest, pleading with her to understand why the house mattered to Evelyn. "Mom needs this place," he wrote. "It's her anchor. Don't take it from her." The letter was a knife to Evelyn's heart, but also a weapon. She sent it to Tom, who called it a game changer. The appeal hearing was less crowded, the air heavy with tension. Marianne's lawyer presented a shaky case, relying on a supposed verbal agreement Daniel had made to sell the house. Tom countered with the letter, reading it aloud, Daniel's words filling the courtroom with his love for his mother. Evelyn watched Marianne's face, expecting anger, but saw something else: guilt, perhaps, or regret. The judge dismissed the appeal, reaffirming Evelyn's ownership. "This matter is settled," she said sternly. "No further claims will be entertained." Marianne left without a word, her lawyer trailing behind. Evelyn felt no triumph, only exhaustion. She drove home, the weight of the fight settling into her bones. But when she walked into the house, Lily was there, dropped off early by Marianne. Mom said I could stay the night, Lily said, her eyes bright. Evelyn hugged her tightly, grateful for this small victory. That night, they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the yard. Lily asked about Daniel, and Evelyn told her stories of his first bike ride, his high school prom, his dreams of being a writer. Lily listened, her head resting on Evelyn's shoulder. And for the first time, Evelyn felt like she was passing Daniel's legacy to her, not just fighting to keep it. The community center meetings grew, drawing more parents each week. Evelyn found purpose in their shared grief, in the way their stories wove together. She started a memory wall in the dining room, pinning up photos and mementos from those who'd lost children. Daniel's picture was at the center, his smile a beacon for them all. But Marianne's silence worried Evelyn. She hadn't heard from her since the appeal, and Lily's visits were less frequent. One afternoon, Evelyn called Marianne, her heart pounding. "We need to talk about Lily," she said. Marianne agreed to meet, and they sat in the same cafe, the air thick with unspoken words. "I'm moving," Marianne said abruptly. "To Chicago. For work. Lily's coming with me." Evelyn's heart stopped. "You can't take her away," she said, her voice breaking. "She needs this house. She needs me." Marianne looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Evelyn, but I need to start over. For both of us." They talked for hours, the conversation raw and painful. Evelyn pleaded for Lily to stay connected, to visit in the summers. Marianne didn't promise, but she didn't refuse either. It was the best Evelyn could hope for. The news of Marianne's move hit Evelyn like a physical blow, but she refused to let it break her. She focused on Lily, making every moment count during her visits. They planted flowers in the garden, read Daniel's favorite books, and added more photos to the memory wall. Evelyn wanted Lily to carry the house with her, even if she was miles away in Chicago. She gave her the journal, the letters, and a small locket with Daniel's picture, hoping they'd keep her connected to her father. The community center became Evelyn's lifeline. The support group grew, filling the house with voices and stories. Parents brought mementos, a toy car, a handwritten poem, a worn baseball glove, and pinned them to the wall. Evelyn shared Daniel's story, his love for the house, his dreams for Lily. The group became a family, bound by loss but also by hope. Clara joined, helping organize meetings, and Mr. Jenkins fixed the roof, refusing payment. "This house is special," he said. "It's worth saving." Evelyn wrote to Lily every week, sending letters filled with stories and love. She included photos of the house, the garden, the memory wall, hoping to keep Willow Creek alive in Lily's heart. Marianne rarely responded, but Lily's letters came, full of drawings and questions about her father. Evelyn cherished them, pinning each one to the fridge. One day, a package arrived from Marianne. Inside was a legal document, signed and notarized, transferring any remaining claim to the house to Evelyn. A note was attached. In Marianne's sharp handwriting, "I was wrong. The house is yours. Keep it for Lily." Evelyn stared at the words, stunned. It was the closest Marianne had ever come to an apology. She called Tom, who confirmed the document was binding. The house was hers, free and clear. Evelyn didn't celebrate. Instead, she invited Lily for one last visit before the move. They spent a weekend painting a mural in Daniel's old room, a bright scene of fireflies and stars, a tribute to his love for the night sky. Lily cried when it was time to leave, clinging to Evelyn. "I'll come back," she promised, her voice muffled against Evelyn's shoulder. Marianne arrived to pick her up, And for the first time, she stepped inside the house. She looked at the memory wall, the mural, the photos, and something softened in her face. "You've done something good here," she said quietly. "I didn't see it before." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "It's for all of us," she said. "For Daniel." Marian didn't stay long, but she agreed to let Lily visit every summer. It was a fragile truce, but it was enough. As they drove away, Evelyn stood on the porch, waving until the car disappeared. The house felt empty, but not lifeless. It was full of Daniel, of Lily, of the people who'd found solace within its walls. Months later, the support group was thriving, the house a beacon for the grieving. Evelyn became a quiet hero in Willow Creek. Her strength a story whispered in the library, the cafe, the church. She never stopped writing to Lily, never stopped tending the garden or adding to the memory wall. The house was her victory, not just over Marianne, but over despair. One evening, as Evelyn sat in her armchair, Daniel's photograph in her hands, she felt a peace she hadn't known since his death. The house was more than a home, no, it was a legacy, a place where love outlasted loss. She thought of Lily, growing up far away but carrying this place in her heart. She thought of Daniel, whose spirit lived in every corner. And she thought of herself, a woman who'd fought and won, not just for a deed, but for the right to hold her memories close. Evelyn closed her eyes, the photograph warm against her fingers. The house creaked around her, a soft lullaby of wood and time. She'd kept it, for herself, for Lily, for Daniel. And in its walls, she found the strength to keep going. One day, one memory, one letter at a time.